You've given talks about how to make a good confession. Speaking of mercy,
Yeah.
right? You've talked about that quite a lot. There's a lot of YouTube stuff on things you've said about confession. And I suspect over your priesthood and living in the ghetto, you've probably heard some interesting confessions. Tell me how to make a good confession.
Trust and go. You gotta trust and go. And good preparation. Bless me, Father, for I have sinned. My last confession was such and such amount of time, and try to see what that found. A lot of times I know for me, I mean, I don't want to go confession on a microphone, but I know, when I make a confession, I try to make a good confession, and the attempt to make a good confession is going to be like the foundational root thing. There's been this and there's been that, and there's been a couple instances of this and there's a couple of those, and the bottom line is because, and it all boils down again to a lack of trust.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just not trusting, and as a result of that, there's been, I was with him and with that one, and there's been this and this, because it's almost like the details, yes, they're important to name them and to mention them, because like what you don't want to do, I guess you can learn how to make a good confession by learning like what not to do, say like, well, I'm not sure, I don't know. All right, well then hold on, just hold on. You're not ready to go. You don't want to go there and say, I'm not sure. You want to go and say, bless me, Father, for I have sinned. Last confession was, here we go. Boom, 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 and largely because of boom. And then, and I've seen some folks come and say, I lied 3 times, I was, had bad thoughts 4 times, I did this 9 times. Oh, okay. I'm not like saying like don't enumerate. I mean, if you want to enumerate, go ahead. But I would just add to the enumeration at least 10 times, I think. You know what I'm saying? Are you sure? Because God's going to say, It was more like 39. You thought it was 9. It was like 39. But he would say, okay, I've done such and such and such like 12 times, it seems, as far as I can tell. And then I've done this, and 22 times, as far as I can tell. And then he said, why as far? And if the priest says, why as far as you can tell? Because I'm trusting God to get, I know the numbers don't count, but I want to make a good confession. And then just roll with it like that. And not to get stuck on myself and not to get stuck on the sin, and say, well, this keeps repeatedly coming back, and every time and how long is this going to be? Okay. And then, okay, if it's 1,000 times, then 1,001 times. But then guess what? Y'all be doing the same thing, and like there's the Chesterton thing about monotony. Say, repeating these same sins, and I don't know if I'm making a good, it's getting monotonous. Okay. But then, only little children in God, like God says to the sun comes up, going to say, do it again. And the sun goes up. Do it again. The sun goes down. It's not monotonous. It's a magnificent sunrise. It's a magnificent sunset. We be going like, this is monotonous. Okay. We need to become like that little child. Becoming like a little child, we enter into the kingdom. Then we have the kingdom attitude and perspective on things, which is supposed to be God's in charge. And yes, and then they say the saints went to confession every day and when they went, it didn't take forever. They were saying, yeah, yesterday I was thinking about this, and today it was like, I did the same thing again because of this. Boom. All right. And we don't want to become like anxious and overdone with that, but it's because they're trusting God so much and they're so over themselves and they want to be on to Him, and then the bit about the repeating thing, guess what? Guess who repeats? The Father. He repeats infinitely. There's no enumeration. It's innumerable. It's immeasurable. So if I do this 100 million thousand times, good guys, 100 million times 10 billion times, I can break your calculator. So kind of going in, so being well prepared, and if I'm really not sure, okay, well then start with that. Bless me, Father, if I have sinned. I was preparing for my confession, and I think I'm blinded by my pride because I wasn't sure like what to say. So I really want to confess. Well, now that I think about it, and then be prepared. Say, yeah, man, I kind of fell into this stuff and that stuff because at the end of the day, I was really lazy with this and that and the other thing. And I'm really sorry. And I want the grace to not only forgiveness, but I want to be healed and I want to be strengthened.
Hey, thanks guys for checking out the Conor Gallagher Show. Please take a moment to like, subscribe, or comment, or whatever you got to do to support it. And I appreciate that very much.